Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
One of the most common issues that comes up in caregiving is what to do when it's no longer safe for your loved one to drive. In this episode, which came straight from a listener question, we'll talk about what to do when that time comes. But first, Jennifer, how is your mom? This could take a while.
This could take a while. So for anyone who's listening to our episodes in order, then you know the last episode featured Gagi. She was staying here with us during an ice storm, and we had her over here just to make sure in case power went out and we couldn't get to her that she was someplace safe. A few days after we got her home from that, she went into the hospital, got the dreaded call in the middle of the night from the EMTs. She had pulled her medical alert button and the EMTs were there and they called. And she was, of course, refusing to go to the hospital. And the EMTs said, we're a little concerned, though, because we just asked her what year it was. And she said it's 1962.
Not even close.
Not even close. So obviously very concerning. So a race over there in the middle of the night, called my brother while I was on the way over. And, we were kind of in a, I hate to say pattern, and it has been a while, but just told him to hang tight. Let me get there, kind of see what's going on. So we did, in fact, have to go to the hospital. Long story short, she apparently had a TIA. So
transient ischemic stroke.
Exactly.
They think, though. Did they say for sure?
No, they did.
They have determined that 100% now?
They were concerned it was a full-on stroke at first, and she definitely was having difficulty using her left arm and left leg. And she definitely seemed a little bit confused. So we were in the ER for, 12, 13 hours. And then, of course, they ultimately admitted her. But surprisingly, she bounced back really quickly. She gained the use of her left arm and left leg again. Of course, they ran all of the tests, the CAT scan, the MRI, brainwave test. You name it, they did it. And yes, ultimately did determine that it was what they said was a small TIA, which is basically like a mini stroke. And the neurologist had a really good talk to me like I'm a fourth grader, sort of explanation of, what had happened. And then, of course, while she's in the hospital, and my brother and I are swapping back and forth. She was only there for about, 48 hours, actually a little bit less than that. But it's just funny how you're in a time warp when you're there, and it felt like, so much longer than that. And I feel like we did 4 shift swaps and, sending notes back and forth to each other, for whoever we saw while we were there. I saw this doctor or that PT person, and he saw this doctor and that OT person. And
that initial overnight shift, when you get there in the middle of the night, it so just long. Screws you up so much.
It's so long, though. I will say, thankfully, she got back very quickly. The staff was just absolutely amazing. And of course, Gagi's Gagi. She's just always got such a delightful demeanor about herself. Everyone falls in love with her. And that's very helpful because I'm not saying they don't take great care of all patients. I know they do, but they, healthcare workers seem to really enjoy working with Mom. I'm not happy we're there, but yeah. So a couple of days. And then they, of course, started the conversation in the hospital about wanting to send her to rehab. And thankfully now for us, and it involves having to obviously, observe very closely. For us, we have determined that is not usually the best course of action for her. They send you to these rehab places, skilled nursing facilities, and the point of it is to do the PT and the OT, which they do. And I know that they've got really good, physical therapist and occupational therapist on staff. And when they come in the room or take her out of the room to go do those things, it's fantastic. But outside of that, she sits in a bed in part because she's labeled a fall risk. So they do not want her to get out of bed at all unless she's being assisted by, a certified nursing assistant or an LPN or whoever's there, which results in her just sitting in bed for a really long time, and it sets her back even further. So, my brother and I definitely have learned to advocate, and we know what we can do, and we can say to the hospital staff, we're not going to leave her alone. And, So ultimately they discharged her. So it was great. And man, she bounced back so quickly that after 2 nights of staying with her, we agreed that she seemed back to normal. So now we're going to talk about the second EMT call in the middle of the night, because she didn't fall this time. The first one, she fell. She actually was walking from one place to another in her apartment, and that's when the TIA hit, and she actually collapsed, fell, hit her head on the wall, that whole thing. Second EMT call in the middle of the night. She couldn't get out of her chair. Her knees were bothering her, and she literally just could not stand up out of her chair. So raced back over there, spent the night. That started a round of my brother and I staying with her for the next, I want to say, close to a week.
Was it that long? It doesn't seem like it was that long. 3, 4, 5. Probably 4 or 5.
It was 4 or 5. And also, because she'd just been discharged from the hospital, we had the orders for, in-home healthcare, PT, OT. This time we think maybe there's going to be an order for speech therapy, which is great. So anyway, got her back on track again. And she's been staying by herself, so we think we're in a good place. However, EMT call number 3, which just came on Valentine's Day. And in fact, my brother and I and you, Steve, were all over there on Valentine's Day. We were actually putting a new mattress in the spare bedroom in her apartment so that my brother and I can sleep a little more comfortably when we're over there. But all was well. All was fine. She was in good spirits. She was doing great. I leave. I think my brother left probably about 30 minutes or so after I did. And you and I, Steve, were sitting here just relaxing a little bit. EMT call. She had slipped out of her chair because she has this rolling cart sitting next to her chair, and a wheel had come off, and she did the thing that my brother and I keep telling her not to do, which is to lean over to try to do things down on the floor. She leaned over to try to put the wheel back on the cart, and she just slipped out of her chair. She didn't hurt herself. She just slipped out of her chair.
But she couldn't get up. So yet another call to the EMTs. Her emergency button has been getting a workout.
It has gotten a workout lately. And for anyone out there listening who might say, are you sure it is safe for your mom to still be living on her own? I promise you that my brother and I are paying very close attention. We've got all the things in place to continue to allow her to live independently for right now. And she truly can get her around her apartment just fine. But if she scoots too close to the edge of her recliner chair and tries to do something really dumb, like lean over and get something off the floor and slips, she just can't get herself up off the floor.
Well, and, many old people, if they hit the floor, they can't get back up.
Yeah.
She just needs to do things that, or not to do things that will lead to her sliding on the floor.
Yes.
Like trying to fix a wheel on a cart.
Yeah. So my brother and I have been getting quite a caregiving workout in the last week and a half. It has been, frankly, very stressful. It's been very stressful, and especially when you're not getting a lot of sleep, that's very challenging. And then you find that, you're not communicating always very well. And even in text messages, sometimes not communicating very clearly, or you're, reading things too fast and missing stuff because your brain's thinking about the 5 other things that you've got to get done related to all of this. So, I'm hoping, knock on the wood of the dining room table, that maybe we can have a little bit of a respite. I mean, we're going to have a lot of in-home healthcare therapies happening, which is great, but hoping for things to calm down a little bit.
I hope so too.
So, while Mom's been here, I know you've seen a little bit more of your mother-in-law than you would really care to see. She doesn't have a lot of modesty anymore.
No, I was in my office, which is around the corner from our downstairs bathroom, and I heard you, Jennifer, helping her get up and get out of the bathroom. Or actually, I'm sorry, you had come downstairs. She was walking out of the bathroom, and I heard you say, "Where are your pants?"
Yeah.
Why are you not wearing pants?
Yeah.
She said, I needed to change them. You need to put on pants.
No, she was like, well, I'm just going to go sit in the chair and put the blanket over me. I'm like, Mom, you can't do that. Like, Steve is here. You can't do that.
I don't care that much, but I'd really rather she had on pants or a nightgown or something.
I know. It's just, it's comical, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So that is enough about what's been going on in the world of Gagi. Steve, how's your mom?
She's doing just fine. She really is. However, the building in which she lives is not doing well.
Yeah, it's falling apart
It
around
really
her.
is. All right. So again, Jennifer
It's a
mentioned...
nice building, by the way. It's starting to show its age, I guess.
It's about 25 years old. And unfortunately, I've always thought that if a building is 100 years old, it's a nice, sturdy building. But it's that 25 to 35, they weren't built as well.
Yeah.
And as Jennifer mentioned, Gagi was staying with us. We were having a really nasty, it ended up being a really nasty snow and ice storm. We had 2 or 3 inches of they called it snowcrete. It was concrete ice on top of snow.
I've never seen anything like it.
It didn't go anywhere for weeks, and it was cold here, much colder than usual around here. It didn't get above freezing. And keep in mind, we're in Central Virginia. It didn't get above freezing for about 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, kids were out of school. We don't have school-age kids anymore, but we've got some friends who do. And of course, we know what was happening all around us. They didn't go to school for 2 solid weeks.
Yep. So, but what resulted in that is not 1, not 2, but 3 burst pipes in that building.
Yeah.
The heating and air conditioning, the boiler, it's an old school boiler that took care of heating the dining room, was already acting up, and they were working on getting that fixed. But because it wasn't working, it got really cold in that dining room, and a pipe burst. Now, my mother calls me. It's about 7 o'clock or so. We're sitting and watching television, and she said, "I need an arc." I said, "You what?" She said, "There's water flowing past my apartment." I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "A pipe burst in the dining room." And the dining room's just up the hall from her, but it's higher.
Yeah.
And there are 2 ramps.
Yeah.
And the water was just flowing down the hallway. She said there was an inch of water. I don't know if it was really an inch of water, but it was water flowing.
She's prone to a little of exaggeration.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, like the next day, a pipe burst in a closet in the kitchen, which is across the hall from the dining room. And then about 3 or 4 days later, a pipe burst in the quote unquote private dining room, which you can reserve for family. If you have a bunch of family coming in, everybody wants to sit at a big table and eat together, you can reserve it. A pipe burst in there. Now, thankfully, that didn't cause a lot of damage. However, for about a day, they had low water pressure because of that one. It's been a mess.
Yeah.
So they're getting everything fixed. Also, their emergency pendants are not working.
Yeah,
and that concerns me a great deal.
I can't get over. I that just makes me so nervous.
Yeah, I'm not loving it either. I did talk to the executive director. He said we are making sure the CNAs and or MedTech checks in on everybody every hour. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what if somebody strokes out right after they leave the door? Yeah. Nobody's going to see them for an hour.
If they stroke out, they might not hit their button
Maybe
anyway.
not,
but I know what you mean. What you mean. Like it doesn't feel very safe.
It doesn't. And I'm hoping they get everything fixed up soon. I was told they'd have the emergency pendants by the end of the week, and it wasn't ready.
Well, the trickle down effect of all of this, right, is that...
Oh, right, because the dining room's not available. Yeah. They're eating their dinners in their rooms, which means they're not getting the socialization they're used to. They're not getting the customization of meals that they're used to, which is a big problem for my mother.
Yes.
Because she just wants everything the way she wants it.
The way she wants it. She's paying enough money to be there. She should get it the way she wants it.
Exactly. They're still having activities, so they do still see each other somewhat, but not as much as they're used to. And that's unfortunate. So she said one of the times last week when I went to visit, we just went for a walk in the building because she just needed to get out of her apartment. So
she also had you bring... multiple meals.
Because she was complaining about the food so much, she asked me to bring a large order from our local Italian restaurant that she likes so much, enough where it was about 5 or 6 meals.
She had it all planned out.
She had it all planned out.
Did she ever have you pick up food for her friends?
No, there was talk for a little bit of... I don't know if this is how nationwide this chain is, but there's a restaurant chain called Chicken Salad Chick. And it's like fancy chicken salad. And she really likes it. And she thought, well, maybe we can have like a chicken salad lunch party. And I said, well, I can order it to be delivered. You can pay for it. And then I can tell how much everybody needs to give you a check. And we can do this. It never really amounted to much. So anyway, so that's where we are. It's a bit of a struggle there. I know they're trying to take care of it as best as they can. I don't have any doubt of that, but it is annoying.
Yeah. It's been a hectic couple of weeks around here with the moms. That's for sure.
Right. Between the moms, the weather, and my mother's building.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to mention before we get into the episode real quick, I posted, as of the time we're recording this, today, on our Facebook page, we were mentioned in a New York Times online article. We were quoted.
Very exciting.
It's a blog they have called Wirecutter, which deals with tech issues. And they wrote an article on it's tech for the elderly folks who need assistance. It's smart home stuff, mostly. But I did link it on our Facebook page if you want to take a look. We are quoted in there. They gave us a nice little link, and we have noticed we're getting some new people finding us. So if you are listening one of your first times, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Please make sure you go back and listen to the trailer. If you haven't, it's going to explain an awful lot about us.
Yeah, and if you're so inclined, go back to the beginning and just listen. I'm someone who likes to listen to a podcast starting from episode 1. But I mean, I will say that, this has been a journey for us. We have been talking about our journey for a couple of years now. So I think it makes sense to
I think so too.
You're not going to miss anything if you bounce around from episode to episode,
right.
But you might kind of miss some of the humor and some of the
individual
jokes.
Episodes are what we call evergreen.
You're going to wonder why we're talking about George the squirrel you don't. Yeah.
So, and who's Gagi? Who's Nana?
Right.
You need to know these things. So, go back, find that link, give it a read, and I hope you enjoy it. So, as I mentioned in the intro, this episode comes from a question we received from a listener. Now, as we always say, we love getting emails, texts, and voicemails from listeners because quite frequently they give us ideas for episodes like this one.
Yep. So the email we received was from Sharon, and she wrote, I am in the beginning stages of having to look toward what will happen with my parents. One of the bigger issues I was curious about was the driving conversation. What happens when one parent or both parents are unable to drive? How do you have that conversation? My dad is the only one that will drive. He doesn't let my mom drive, nor does she have a desire for the last almost 10 years, even though she commuted her whole working adult life. It's very disturbing to me that she will not drive. I have no idea how to approach the subject with her. Dad still does a good job driving, but I know there will come a time when he can't. I have no idea what type of resources are out there to start the conversation. In addition, then have a plan in place for when it's no longer feasible for him to drive. Any suggestions would be amazing.
So first off, Sharon, thanks for listening and thanks for writing to us. Also, good for you for planning ahead and identifying a problem before it becomes truly a problem.
Absolutely.
The idea of taking away driving privileges is a really tough one. The ability to drive is a sign of freedom. Nana has said before, that's my mother, of course, if you're new to the show. She said before, it's one of the biggest adjustments she had to make when she became wheelchair bound. She said more than once, she said she misses being able to just hop in the car whenever she wants, go get fast food or go shopping or go do whatever she wants to do. But for many people, when they get older, driving's just not safe.
Yep. So we're going to talk about some general tips to initiate the driving conversation, and then we'll talk specifically about Sharon's situation. But before we do that, we thought we'd quickly explain where our mothers are with the whole driving situation, as neither of them have keys or a car anymore.
It is
Steve,
true. So
talk about your mom.
Mine it's pretty simple. She, as I've mentioned, the reason she's in a wheelchair, she had a spinal cord compression. She's had back problems and spinal cord issues for a long time. And at one point it just pinched and her right leg is essentially paralyzed. Not fully, but real close.
Pretty close.
She can move it a little bit. So when it became obvious that that was not going to be fixed, that it hadn't been fixed by the emergency back surgery she had, it was obvious to everyone she could not drive anymore. And there were no arguments, thank goodness. And so we sold her car. We don't even know where her driver's license is, which is a bit of a concern for me. We can't find the darn thing. But it was not a really big problem for her.
Right. But I think the way, yes, it became very obvious. But part of what you and your brother did to help ease it, I think, with your mom was you helped her turn it into a positive situation.
We did. So what we did, my first thing when I said, Mom, I think we just need to go ahead and sell your car because you can't drive anymore. She said, well, do any of the grandkids need a car? I said, no. I don't think it's a good idea to pick out one kid who gets what is essentially a brand new car. The car was...
No, grandkids.
Grandkids. Yeah, the great grandkids are babies. They don't need cars.
Yeah, sorry. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Yes, there are 5 of them. And, it was a 3-4-year-old car with almost no mileage on it. And it just didn't seem fair for one kid. So what we did, we sold it, split the money between all the grandkids.
Yeah.
And each one of them got a nice little lump sum that went into their savings, went toward school loans, went toward whatever they needed.
Yep.
And I think that was a very fair way of doing it.
I think she really enjoyed the opportunity. It was Christmas. I think they were Christmas
ended up being
gifts.
A Christmas present from her.
And, significant. I mean, cars, and her car was in great condition. It wasn't that old. Yeah. I mean, it was a nice little chunk of change for each of the 5 of them.
Yeah, I think it ended up being $3,500, $30-something $100.
Yeah, I mean, it was not insignificant. So I think it was nice that you guys were able to turn it into a positive for them. So speaking of turning things into a positive, very similar with my mom when the decision was made that she probably shouldn't be driving anymore. So the car that she had was actually a car that my brother and his husband had given to her. So, I don't remember how many years ago, but they ultimately, were ready to buy a new car, and this one was owned outright. And so they just gave it to mom's car was older. They gave this car to her. So she had it for several years. So when the time came, I think I'm trying to remember. I mean, there were probably mom on her own had really stopped driving a whole bunch. She would, in the way her apartment complex is laid out, really the only thing she was doing very much of anymore is she would gather up all her trash in her apartment and she would carry it out to the car, and then she would drive around to the other side of the apartment complex to where the dumpster is to throw away the trash. That was kind of all she was doing.
A distance of about 1/8 of a mile.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember. She may have still been driving somewhere to grab herself a milkshake every now and then. That sounds very Gagi-like. I don't totally remember, but anyway, not very much. But even when they're not driving very much, it's still it's a representation of freedom that is going away.
Even if they're not driving, they could drive.
Exactly. But what happened was, so my brother and his husband have some very good friends who are absolutely lovely people with 2 children, and their daughter was just turning 16. And my brother and his husband have been like uncles to these kids as well. And they thought it might be nice to gift the car to their friend's daughter. And mom knows these people as well. They've been here with us to celebrate, many family occasions. We do Christmas Eve with them every year. We've done it for many, many years. My brother was really able to turn it into a gift-giving situation on this young girl's 16th birthday. And my mom was all on board, thought it was fantastic. And I think it made her feel really good. Like she was having, she was helping in that decision to give the car away and to give up her driving privileges. And so it actually worked out really well. And the interesting thing is, I've noticed this, when we're at doctor's appointments now, if it ever comes up anywhere, my mom will say like, yeah, I gave up my keys, a couple of years ago, which, she did. She really did. But I mean, truly, like she feels like it was her decision, and I think we helped make it that way. So highly recommend that if you have that opportunity to somehow kind of flip it a little bit and allow them some participation in what happens to the vehicle and the giving up of the driving. And I recognize maybe not everybody, you might have a car that you have to sell for whatever reason to make the money back. I get it. But if you're in a position and you can do what we did with either of our moms, highly recommend it.
And that leads right into, just some tips and advice that we have on this. First off, when you start becoming concerned that driving isn't safe anymore, address the situation with your loved one in a calm manner, preferably before anything major has happened, like an accident or they got lost or whatever. The purpose of taking away the keys is obviously to avoid them hurting themselves or others. And so hopefully it's a talk you can have before that happens.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you really hit the nail on the head, like before they hurt somebody else. A lot of people, it helps, I think, if you can broaden their perspective a little bit. Like, hey, this isn't about just like taking your freedom away and taking something away from you. Think about how you might feel if an accident happens and someone else gets hurt. Like, you don't want to be responsible for that. So, ideally you want them on board with the decision so it doesn't turn into a fight. Don't, just like we were saying, like, don't come at them and say, we've decided this for you. Rather, point out that you're concerned that maybe it's not safe for them to be behind the wheel anymore.
Be aware, this talk may not go well.
Yeah, it may not.
Particularly with men. Elderly males have been the man of the family for many, many decades. And a lot of the cases, much like Sharon's father, they did all the driving. I know my father did. When I was growing up, my mother didn't drive, my father drove. Driving their family places is just something that they do, and not being able to hop in the car anymore may be completely and utterly unthinkable to them.
Yep. So, you'll want to mention specific reasons, examples why they shouldn't be driving. These, could be memory issues that they're, getting lost when they drive. Could be examples of times when they had medication problems that caused sort of mental or physical problems that caused impairments while they were behind the wheel.
And you can also appeal to their place as a provider. Now, this is what we were talking about with our mothers. Like we said, if there's a family member or a friend in need of a car, just allow them to be the hero. And, find a niece, we talked about this already, but, just mention you don't use your car all that much.
Yeah.
So maybe, so-and-so could really use it. Yeah. This conversation may not work. People are stubborn. But if that's the case, you may have to bring in reinforcements.
So one way to go with that might be to bring in another family member. Is there a family member that your loved one maybe has always listened to more than you? Which that's really interesting. Sorry, squirrel moment here. George, squirrel moment. I don't think we've had one for a few episodes. So part of my job involves some customer relations and, have an ongoing conversation with somebody who's on my team. And we talk about, he might say something to someone he's talking to and they do not accept it. And all he has to do is say, let me let you speak to somebody else. And he doesn't even have to say, like, let me let you speak to my boss. Just let me let you speak to somebody else. And they can, and then I can literally say the same thing. And then they're like, oh, okay. Not because I'm his boss and not because he's said that I'm his boss, but just sometimes people need to hear it like more than once, right, and from like multiple people, and then somehow it sinks in.
Right. And in my family, it was my grandmother, my mother's mother, would not listen to my mother.
Right.
But for some reason or another, she'd listen to my father. Yeah. I don't know why that is.
Well, some of that could have been a little bit of a generational thing. You listen to what the man says.
Sure, maybe.
We can roll our eyes about that, but that was.
And I seem to recall when it did come time to take away her keys, it may have been my father that had to be the one that said it.
I feel like it was too.
I have a dim memory of that. I'm not sure, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I feel like that's right. Well, if you're caring for a parent, they may still feel like they're the one in charge, obviously, because they raised you. Another place to look for help could be their doctor. They can be an ally and someone that your loved one trusts. And, people of older generations were taught to listen to doctors and respect them. And oftentimes your loved one will listen much better if it's coming from outside of the family. Their doctor may be able to present specific medical reasons why it's not safe for them to drive anymore. And hopefully they'll listen. And, that, by the way, yet another squirrel moment. George, you're getting a workout tonight,
I pulled
dude.
George out. He's sitting right in front of you now.
But I think that's true. It's funny. My brother and I have joked about it with the in-home health care providers who are coming in for PT and OT. Now I feel like George is staring at me, though. That's kind of a little creepy.
He's eyeing you.
You turned him around to look straight at me. Okay. We will joke with the in-home healthcare providers. They will say something to my mom and she'll be like, okay, yes. And I mean, I just did it a couple of days ago with one of the physical therapists. And I was like, Ramona, I'm like, it's not like she's not heard this before, but I'm so glad that you are here saying this to her now. And, my mom knows. But, same thing with a really serious issue like driving or not driving.
Right.
Maybe
and particularly if it's a doctor
doctor
they've gone to for years and years and years and years and years. Dr. Smith, he's known her since she was 50 or whatever. And, hopefully that'll get through to them.
Yep. Agreed.
Now, this may sound like an odd one, but if your family has an attorney they've worked with before, and a lot of families do have an attorney they've worked with on this,
family,
that, and the other.
Estate attorney or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
This may be a place to go as well. They can point out the legal ramifications of driving when it's no longer safe. They can point out things like the cost of damaging property or injuring another person or, God forbid, worse. If logic doesn't work, maybe pointing out the damage to their bank account might work, hopefully.
Yeah, sometimes money talks in a lot of different ways. Well, one helper could also be your state's Department of Motor Vehicles. There's, no nationwide standard or mandate for getting older drivers off the roads. But if worse comes to worse, you can report your loved one to the state
If you
DMV.
have to do what you have to do.
Right? If you have to, depending upon the state, they may bring your loved one in for a driving exam to, see if they're still safe. Of course, a couple of drawbacks to that, obviously. That could be massively embarrassing, to your loved one, or, I guess you got to be careful. They could go in and pass the test.
Yeah.
So that could be a little bit risky.
It could be a problem.
If last resort, if you feel like you need to go that route, and that's certainly an option.
Right. And one final last resort, particularly if your loved one has memory issues, is to lie to them. Remove their car from the driveway. Tell them you had to take it for repairs. When they ask about it later, they had to order some parts. It may be a while. I think it's going to be weeks. And just put them off as long as possible and hope they kind of forget to ask. And if absolutely needed, you can just tell them, the garage couldn't fix the car. We had to just junk it. It stinks. But it sucks to have to lie like that. But sometimes it's therapeutic lying is what I think they call it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do it.
I just was thinking, this just popped into my head. There is a man in the apartment complex where my mom lives, and I happened to be standing out on the front porch one day, and my mom wasn't out there, but her neighbor was out there, and her neighbor and her daughter, and we were chatting, and all of a sudden we heard this loud, like screeching and metal and, all the things, you think of. And we looked down the parking lot, and this guy who I think everyone, so mom's neighbor, she moved away, but, she knew all the happenings in the apartment complex. But we're standing there. He was backing into a handicap space and backed straight. I think he went to go straighten his car up in the parking space, but he forgot that he still had it in reverse, and he gunned it back up over the curb into the handicap sign. Thankfully, the curb kind of stopped him from backing all the way into the apartment building. But, mom's neighbor was like, I have mentioned to his daughter several times that I don't think it's safe for him to drive anymore, because she, I think, had witnessed him driving in and out and trying to pull into parking spaces, and it didn't look very good anymore. And, that's an instance of, that wasn't great what happened, but thankfully there were no human outside of him. There were no other humans. There wasn't a human standing behind him. Although this is the other thing, though. I remember mom's neighbor went running down the parking lot to check on him. But oddly, she's no spring chicken either, but she started to walk behind his car. And I said, no. I, yelled her name, and I was like, no. I'm like, go the other way. Because I'm like, oh my God. Because he was still sitting in the car. And I'm like, what if he hits the gas again? So anyway, that was, I don't want to say comical, because it wasn't comical, but that was, no one got hurt, but someone could have gotten hurt.
An example of someone who shouldn't be driving.
100%. Yes. So finally, we wanted to address Sharon's specific question about her mom and dad. So as a reminder, she said her dad's always been the driver. Her mother just simply refuses to drive anymore. She's worried about what to do if her dad isn't safe to get behind the wheel, but technically her mother is. That's definitely a conundrum.
It is a tough one.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think the best way to handle this, and this is just me, just one man's opinion, I think when it comes to the time when he can't drive anymore, neither of them drive. That's what I think. Here's my thought on this. So Sharon's mother sounds like she's not that interested anymore. So trying to make her father sit in the passenger seat while her mother drives, even though she doesn't want to in the first place, seems like it won't work.
Yeah. And honestly, if her mother hasn't driven in a really long time, Sharon, if your mom hasn't driven in a long time, even if she's, fully sharp, mentally and physically fit, she may be out of practice, so that might not be the best idea in the world. And let me tell you, I have said to my mom many times, I'm sure my brother has too, when we take her out of the house and we're on the roads out there, and then you're watching drivers do utterly insane things, because I swear to God, it's gotten so much worse. I've said to her, I'm like, I'm so thankful that you don't drive anymore. And she's like, yeah, me too. Like, I think she recognizes that her, what do you call it?
Reflexes?
Yeah, that. See, I am losing words too. Her reflexes are not as good anymore. She knows that.
Oh, sure.
So that would be one thing. Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you could have your mom do the driving, but it does seem like there are also some other things that you should be prepared for if you decided to go that route.
And it's funny, this really brings back a lot of memories, and I'm sure a lot of people's families were like this. As I said earlier, growing up, my father did all the driving. Now, my father passed away nearly exactly 25 years ago. And, obviously mom had to do all of her driving and dad traveled. A lot of it's not as though she didn't drive. It's just if they went someplace together, she never drove. But it's funny. It reminds me, when my mother started needing additional help and I would go over there and maybe take her to a doctor's appointment, or we'd go together to go do something. I always drove. And I think one time I wanted to kind of see how well she drove. And I said, well, why don't you drive this time? She said, no, I don't want to. Yeah. I said, nah, you go ahead and drive. She said, I know you're going to be testing my driving. I don't want to drive. She knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, and
I don't know that was that good of a driver to begin with.
She was not. There was the incident the wrong way on the one-way ramp. This was 25 years ago.
A long time ago.
Like a long time ago, and still... And back when our moms used to hang out together, I can remember my mom commenting on your mom's driving.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, a lot of people didn't know this, but if your parent is on Medicaid, they may be able to get, free rides to medical appointments. This can be a lifesaver if your loved one is still able to manage their appointments, but it's no longer safe for them to drive. So we've put a link to some information about that in the show notes of this episode.
So that could be a solution. Obviously, we haven't provided solutions for what to do. Obviously, you're going to be driving in some places. There's also this. There's also, if they have a smartphone and they're with it enough, there's Uber. I
was just going to say, I mean, it somewhat depends on sort of your financial situation. Because, right, Uber, Lyft, whatever, any of those, obviously you can do that, right? But certainly, if insurance is able to cover, and I don't know that it's necessarily even just Medicaid, because I do feel like there are, so for example, the place where my mom goes for most of her appointments, I mean, that's geriatric care. They know a lot of people need transportation. Right. I don't know that that's specific to
Well, I checked. Medicare will pay for emergency transportation, so an ambulance. Medicaid will pay for that. And in just certain circumstances, and again, you have to check with your individual state because it's state by state, which is a little frustrating. Yeah. But Medicaid can cover trips to a doctor.
Well, I think it's just a good overall reminder to just remember to think about, and it is hard to do when you're in the middle of all of this. My brother and I were having this conversation recently about what services might be offered through, because Gagi is on Medicaid, what services are offered through that. We don't always think to utilize those services, in part because he and I are there and we're doing all the things, but also if we ever just want to have a little bit of a break or, whatever, we don't always think to pick up the phone and call to check on that stuff. So this is a great example of something to, don't forget that you might have something available to you.
Right. And check your local county area agency on aging. They have to have a website. It's federal law. There may be some shuttles and stuff that they could use. It's entirely possible. And that's going to vary from county to county to county to county. But just check that. So that may be a solution as well.
Yep, definitely. Sharon, thank you so much for the question. I think this is a really good topic.
It really is. And it's shocking we haven't talked about it before. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I do think it is probably one of the more challenging conversations to have with someone when they're aging. Because again, like I said earlier, I mean, it's a representation of other things.
Yep.
Freedom. And that's a tough thing to tell someone that you basically need to take some of their freedom away from them.
Right. And, like Jennifer said, thanks, Sharon. Sharon was a brand new listener. She just found us not long ago.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Sharon.
So thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. I'm going to run through all the ways you can contact us like Sharon did. You can email us at caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can send us a text or a voicemail. The number is 804-723-1221. You can find us on Twitter. We don't post there all that much, but it's at Gen X Caregiving, all one word. We're also on Facebook. Please join us on Facebook. That's where we post the most. The best way to go get that is to go to our show notes and click on the link that I've put there. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.
Good night, everyone.